We've seen Chuck Schumer call for the clerk to read literally every page of a 940-something odd bill. We have seen all kinds of delays coming from the Senate. It took J.D. Vance to play the political hero for the GOP to get this to the House. House GOP does not seem too excited about this bill.
No,
they do not seem really happy about it. Give us the framing, Jolly, and just take us through where we are now.
So real quick, I just want to, before I even break it down for you, I got someone who's more qualified than me here to make that assessment. I got Congresswoman Yassamin Ansari from Arizona's 3rd District, who literally just walked off the House floor. Congresswoman, to set the stage for you, the Republicans called a 5-minute vote at 12:15. It's a procedural vote. This was a step that was necessary before we go to the vote for the big ugly bill, because Charles, every time I say big beautiful bill, I cry inside. It's the big ugly bill. But Congresswoman, how can we still be on a 5-minute vote 5 hours after it was called? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so technically they're usually around 15 minutes, but it's up to the speaker how long they want to keep the votes open. So the reason these votes are being held for so long is indicative of the fact that they don't have the votes. And the one that we are on right now, which is the second of the 3 procedural votes that we have before debate would begin and then final passage of the bill, if they were to close this one that has been open for 5 hours, as you said, then they would have to open the 3rd one. And that is the one I think they're probably most concerned about. And they will make sure they have the votes to pass it. Because if the next one, which is the rule, fails, then we can't move forward with debate and can't move forward with final passage. It would actually go back to the Rules Committee where it was last night, late into the night. So,
and what I'm hearing, and I'm sure that you can probably give us some insight here, there's more than 10 Republicans currently that are voting no if this bill were to go to vote right now, and that's why Mike Johnson and Republican leadership are panicking. What's your insight there, as much as you can tell us?
So a little behind the scenes of current times in Congress, I actually probably don't have much more information than you have, is the honest truth. It is so chaotic in terms of how the Republicans are operating. And a lot of the information about where people stand honestly comes from reporters who are on the Hill, from social media, et cetera. We know that Republicans, the ones who have indicated that they're not supportive, the Freedom Caucus wrote a letter indicating what they don't like. They are on the side of, they think that the Senate stripped out some elements that they wanted. For example, they claim in there that the rollback of the Green New Deal provisions don't go far enough, or the Medicaid cuts don't go far enough. So that's the Freedom Caucus. And then there's some of the more moderate members who on the other side of things, are worried about the Medicaid cuts, the clean energy issues. So people were at the White House today. I think a lot of deals are being cut. It's really shady. I think, I think the truth is that Donald Trump is making all sorts of promises to get people on their side.
But why even the rush? Why the rush? Like this?
There's no real rush. There's
exactly.
No
rush. And that was the question that I wanted to sort of ask. It seems like we're dealing with this sort of made up, self-imposed July 4th deadline that doesn't really count for anything anywhere. What are the chances, and I realize you don't have a crystal ball here, but what are the chances that perhaps this gets delayed, perhaps beyond the holiday, in a way that allows members to really take a different look at this bill and either make changes or walk things back so that it doesn't end up being as terrible, as big, as ugly as Jolly has talked about when we end up with whatever the version is that's going to get passed?
I don't think it's impossible by any means. I definitely think that the pressure has been working and the organizing has been working. I think the only reason we are at the point that we are today, which is that it hasn't passed yet, is because so many Republicans are feeling immense pressure. In the Senate, I think that was very clear with Lisa Murkowski. Of course, she ultimately caved, but she was able to negotiate. A lot of it is these ones who are on the fence too. They largely do this to get some sort of special deal cut for themselves and for their districts. That is one unfortunate, piece of all of this, is that that the members who are at the White House right now, Donald Trump is doing anything possible and offering anything to them so that they will oblige, probably with a slight combination of threatening. But I think it's possible. What would have to happen right now is the only way it would be delayed post-holiday is if there are major changes made, and it then has to go back to the Senate. If it's small things, I don't think that would be the case. But if it's major changes, then it would have to go back to the Senate. So obviously it would not get passed. But I mean, look, it's almost 6:00 now. We haven't even gotten to the third procedural vote,
Right.
which is the rule. I think they're still deep in negotiation. So I think there's still a lot of room for pressure. And I
But
think
here's my theory. Here's my
Yeah.
theory, Congresswoman. I know you got to go because chaos on the Hill. But here's my theory that this was a ping pong situation where House Republicans pinged it up the Senate under the impression that the Senate was going to kill it. But then the Senate Republicans were like, nah, we don't want to be the ones
We'll make it worse.
of Donald Trump. Right. So we're going to pong it back to House under a new version. Right. That's why they made the changes, to be fair, because, obviously we don't know every change they made yet, but the changes I've seen have been petty and minuscule. It seems like they just made the changes, so it has to go back to the House in hopes that now the House Republicans will be the one to piss off Donald Trump. Does my theory hold water?
Well, I mean, Lisa Murkowski said it herself. She, when she was interviewed, she was like, she said it was agonizing to vote for this, and she really hopes that the House will improve it. It's absurd. Like, why don't you just improve it? That you were the one vote
Right.
that could have made the difference. So you're right. I mean, it's definitely a game of ping pong. You have, a party that is so beholden and so terrified of retaliation from Trump and this administration that nobody wants to be the one to fall on the sword, even when they know that they may be, sacrificing. Not only they don't care, I don't think they're a little too callous to care about the impacts of on people, but I think sometimes they even go above caring about their own, reelection, even because they're so scared of the president.
Go ahead,
Can
Charles.
I ask one question, Congresswoman? As we are in this sort of space, it seems like and I don't want to be the harbinger of bad news, but it seems like this bill, ultimately, some iteration of it is an inevitability. What I'd like to ask you is, do you get the impression that Speaker Johnson has enough control over House GOP to move that along sooner than later? So the thing is, I realize that I think everybody is coming to grips with the fact that we're on some journey to the destination where this bill ultimately passes. But part of this is it seems like it's going to depend on Mike Johnson's ability to get the troops in line. And I don't know, I'd like your sense on his ability to actually get that done.
I think because he has the Trump factor, that he will be able to do so.
So it's not
about him, though. It's about Trump's direct involvement. Trump comes over and comes to caucus meetings. I mean, that's unusual. Trump is inviting the members who are holdouts to the White House. I think if Johnson was on his own, it would be a much different. I mean, I was talking about it with some colleagues today who were here during the impeachment votes, for example, or during, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And they were saying it's very different when they don't have Trump over their shoulder with the threats and the intimidation and the MAGA cult behind him. Then they are much more willing to act in a bipartisan way, or to, really to work on issues together, or to stick their neck out and vote for impeachment of Trump. It's just different when he actually is the president.
Right. And listen, for those like people watching who may be wondering, like, what the hell does all this mean? Because let's be honest, the process of legislation isn't the sexiest thing in the world. And a lot of people don't understand the process. So like, to make it clear, here's what's going on. A bill passed the House, went to the Senate. Senate made changes to that bill, kicked it back to the House. while all this is happening, they are rushing to make this bill happen before an imaginary deadline. Donald Trump made this imaginary deadline. And the last thing that I want to kind of put the cherry on top of it is Donald Trump has passed less legislation than any other president in the previous 100 plus years. He has been ruling by way of executive order since he was coronated on January 20th. And so the reason that he called this the one big beautiful bill is it's the only piece of legislation he was looking to pass. So from the day that this was introduced on the House floor months ago to where we are right now, it has been the full force of the Trump administration put behind it. Trump Republicans have been threatened, as the Congresswoman pointed out. Trump has stated he'll primary those who don't get in line. We watched Tom Tillis in the Senate say, "Well, fuck you. I'm not even going to run for re-election." Then we've seen, a massive fight inside the Republican Party for one reason only. This is not a good bill. Congresswoman, if you could, while you're here, we've heard about Medicaid cuts. We've heard about SNAP cuts. This bill does a whole lot more shit than just that. That's nasty and gross. Can you walk us through some of the significant ones, please?
Yes, beyond those two, which are two of the ones that will be massive. On the topic of, ICE and defense budget, this is a massive giveaway to private prison companies. There's billions of dollars for ramp up for ICE, which we know, masked agents have been kidnapping people off of the streets. They want to pretty much quadruple the capacity of detention centers across the country. And we know the conditions have been horrific. They've been snatching up people who have legal status, et cetera, et cetera. For the climate, it's horrible. I mean, I have worked on climate change issues my entire career. Climate change is the defining issue of our time, and it's a job creator. And I've spoken with labor leaders, electricians in particular in Arizona, a Republican leader of the local union who just was astounded, just can't believe why Republicans would vote for this, because he's like, truly tens of thousands of jobs in Arizona are going to be lost. The clean energy, investing in solar and wind and nuclear and semiconductor plants in Arizona has been a huge boon for us. And those are going to be ripped away because they're taking away all of the tax credits. Meanwhile, all of the subsidies for the oil and gas industry remain and have remained for over 100 years. All of the rollbacks in the infrastructure bill funding, the Inflation Reduction Act, that's some of the worst of it. In my view, there's also cutbacks to Pell Grants. And so education will be impacted and the ability to afford going to school.
Is it also true that there's going to be a stipulation in this bill that will actually limit judicial purview of the executive branch?
I believe so. I believe
the wording was such that would limit, because they're making it a budget issue instead of an executive issue. It's gross. Congresswoman, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain this to us from fresh off the House floor. This 5-hour, 15-minute vote. Charles, I don't know if you have anything else for the Congresswoman.
There is so much that I could talk to you about, because
I know, right?
The bill that's a problem. But I do appreciate the time that you have spent here. My sort of big takeaway here is the deficit is not a sexy issue. It's not it's not an issue that sends voters to the ballot box, despite how much it affects the actual lives of voters and has an impact. One of the things that the Senate bill did was it ran directly into conflict with the deficit hawks on the right. And it seemed like that was going to be a thing that was going to delay it in the House, because you had a number of hardline budget Republicans who were like, look, my people sent me here to shrink the budget or shrink the deficit. We really didn't do that the way we said we were going to with Doge. We're definitely not doing it here. So at what point do you think the credibility of those members runs out either with their party, or does it ever run out, given that ultimately the federal deficit is not something that is a sexy issue that voters really get excited about, but it is something that deficit hawks have at least said out of their mouths is a priority?
I agree with where you were going with that. I think it's not sexy. And I think at the end of the day, I don't think there's that many voters on either side that are voting on issues like that. I think from a credibility perspective, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's an example like that in Arizona. We have Congressman David Schweiker. He's in a neighboring district. That man has given thousands of hours of floor speeches on the deficit. I mean, literally, like that is his singular issue that he's known for it in Arizona. And he, at the last time we voted on this, he was one of the two who allegedly fell asleep and didn't make the vote. But he did interviews to say that he would have voted for it anyway. But it's outrageous. I mean, how can you? I would be so embarrassed if I had spent tens of hours just talking about something and saying this is the most important issue and and then going and voting for a bill like this. I mean, it's just. But again, at the end of the day, is he campaigning on that issue? Probably not. So I still think like in terms of an electoral, capacity, and when we're talking about issues, we need to focus on what this bill does that impacts people really on a day-to-day basis on the healthcare front, housing front, immigration front.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Also, hope you're not stuck there till midnight again because of Republicans' inability to do their job.
If it means we delay this thing,
100%.
I want to be here. I'm in it. Like, let's push this thing. Keep advocating. Keep the pressure on, because, like, truly, in my mind, delaying this as long as possible is still a good thing, because that means we're delaying the harm that will come from it.
You go out of session on Friday, right?
Or we weren't even supposed to be here this week, but
okay, got it.
Yeah.
So what would that look? So if we go into the July 4th weekend, you're going to go out of session for a federal holiday. I mean, right?
I think we could be here. I think if we could, I mean, we were supposed to be in district all this week. People were flying back. It was an emergency call back.
Yeah, right.
There were actually a lot of travel delays because of storms and such. So people, even some everyone was having a hard time getting here.
Okay. Well, keep us up to date. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Representative Yassamin Ansari, Arizona's 3rd District, out there fighting a good fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Charles, I tell you, so to reiterate what I initially told the Congresswoman that I was talking to her about, this vote that the Speaker called at 12:15 was what's called a 5-minute vote. Now, as she pointed out, they can go 15, 20 minutes. It's really at the discretion of the Speaker for anyone who's not legislatively literate. It's really just a way to say, let's get this thing moving kind of deal. But that was at 12:15. And we are now coming up on 6 o'clock. That's 5 hours and 45 minutes for a 5-minute vote. The fact is, and I think this is the biggest takeaway here, they don't have the votes. If they had the votes, he would have already moved on. As the Congresswoman was saying, there's 3 check the boxes they have to do before this vote goes up to a final vote. And they're on the second of those check the boxes. There's still one more to go, which is the rules vote. Now, the rules vote, for anybody who's not familiar, is just basically where they say, hey, does this, procedure, does this bill meet all the rules? Did it get here the right way? Did it follow all the regulations on its path to this vote that we're about to take? And that's where, by the way, this is very important to point out, that's where the bill got hung up last time before it went to the Senate, when everybody, if you guys remember that midnight Republicans calling a 1 o'clock Rules Committee meeting at 1 a.m., it was because of this. The previous bill was hung up in Rules Committee. And so I don't think, this is my assessment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Charles. I don't think that the Speaker wants to go into a rules vote knowing that's where it got held up last time, when we right now don't even have, not we, but they don't have the Republicans to vote on the bill as is. And I think that he's worried about this bill dying in rules.
Right. I think that he's in a very precarious position and needs the sort of push from Papa Trump, if you will, to get his troops in line, because he can't do it. One way or the other, he cannot afford, for the sake of his own job security, either as a speaker or potentially, just being a regular congressman from Louisiana, he's not going to be able to afford the loss that you would take if you are not able to get this done and it falls apart in an embarrassing fashion. So he knows he doesn't have the votes to get it. through rules and lose there would be terrible. But then not to get it through rules makes you look completely ineffective.
It does.
And I think, and so that's the difficulty of this position. But here's the thing, Jolly. I think it's very indicative of the Trump GOP in that you have one narrative that's being parroted as loudly as possible by the leader of your party about how everything's swimmingly going well. This is a big, beautiful bill. It's beautiful. Right. It's going to do one thing and so on and so forth, which would lead you to believe that the rest of your party would sort of easily latch onto it, be aligned, and go along to make things go smoothly. But what you're seeing is very much so the opposite. The narrative that, or the vision about this bill and this legislation and this domestic agenda that's coming from the White House is not something that seems to be shared by the lion's share of his party, let alone not the American people. And so Mike Johnson's stuck in the middle trying to sort of reconcile the two. And he's not the guy to do that. You might even argue that J.D. Vance, as the vice president, isn't even the guy to do that because it took his one vote to get it through the Senate. So I think that Mike Johnson's in a horrible position, that, he's in over his skis. And if Donald Trump is not able to persuade the members of his party, which I think he's going to be able to do, Mike Johnson has more to lose from this than anybody else because the president's going to blame him, right? Like, it's not going to be a failure.
That's the whole point, right? So, First, let me say this. I do agree that he's in a bad position, so fuck him. Like, I don't feel bad for Mike Johnson, obviously. And you mentioned him being from Louisiana. I think it's very important to point out that Louisiana is one of the poorest states.
They're going to get hit hard by this bill.
Yes. And so if this bill passes, Louisiana is going to suffer in a big way. And I feel horrible for Louisianans who have to suffer because of this. But also, you made a very, very good point that I think needs to be reiterated. This is Trump's party. This is Trump's call. We don't have a legislative branch with a backbone. This isn't Republicans fighting Democrats trying to push through a piece of legislation. This is Republicans fighting Republicans trying to pass through a piece of legislation because the legislation is that bad. Because listen, the Republicans have kicked the can down the road so long. I was telling somebody this yesterday. This is the culmination of Republican policies over the course of 10, 15, 20 years. For so long, they told us, let's go back to when Roe was overturned. For 10 years prior to that, they said, no, I wouldn't overturn Roe. I wouldn't support that. Whenever we were looking at the confirmation hearings of various Supreme Court justices, I would not support overturning Roe. There's 75 years of jurisprudence, they said. Blah, 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 blah. Well, here we sit. Right? They overturned Roe. So Republicans don't mind lying to your face as long as you watch this hand and pay no attention to the hand behind their back. So now we're at the point of Republican policy where they don't have any more cards to play. They don't have any more smoke and mirrors. Now they're just pretty much telling you who they are. Okay, listen, guys. We're just going to cut Medicaid and give tax breaks to billionaires. We're going to cut SNAP and increase funding to private prisons and ICE. Like, they don't have any more fancy language to pull the wool over your eyes, because at some point in this transition from democracy to autocracy, it just has to be plain and clear. And that's where we are. And I think these Republican House members and Republican senators are sitting here thinking, damn, like, this is really happening. I don't agree with it. It's against my morals. What do I do? Here's what you do. Fuck re-election.
No. And that's the issue. And that's the issue. The issue is, and I don't want to be cynical here, but the issue is that many of the legislators in Congress right now, particularly on the right, but I'm not going to limit that, if I'm going to be honest, would rather save their jobs than save yours.
Correct.
Right? Like, they would rather
save your health care.
They would rather save their jobs than save yours, than save your life, than save your health care, than save your financial stability. You know, things that took generations to build. But you know, for them being elected in one lifetime, they're, you know, in less than a lifetime, they're willing to sacrifice collectively just so they can say that they're still in Washington.
Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.